Does the government work for us, or do we exist to serve the government? What happens when the government runs out of money? Tonight, the federal government spends money it doesn't have, and it makes the states do the same. When FDR was looking to establish a long-term relationship between the Democratic Party and large groups of voters, one of the socialist whiz kids with whom he surrounded himself came up with the simple idea of Social Security. The federal government would guarantee everyone over the age of 65 income for life. It wouldn't be enough to live on, but it would be in addition to savings and pension and what the kids can get. To fund this, the feds forced all workers and employers to contribute to a fund and agreed to pay those over 65 from the fund. Of course, once these payments start coming, and as folks move into the post-65 age time of their lives, FDR reasoned, they'll vote to keep us in office. Never mind that there's nothing in the Constitution to authorize this. Never mind that the federal government can only do what the Constitution authorizes it to do. FDR thought the Constitution was written in the horse and buggy era, and he never felt constrained by it. Never mind that the federal government, up to that point in history, had never sent checks directly to persons who were not employed by it. The scheme would make folks dependent on the government, which will guarantee votes and facilitate control. People will do as the government wished of them as long as it kept paying them. The whiz kids around FDR also advised him that the system would stay solvent, since with population growth, more people would be entering the workforce than would be leaving it, and thus more money would be coming into the fund than would be going out of it. Of course, FDR's whiz kids and he did not anticipate the baby boom, population control, people living longer, and subsequent presidents increasing the benefits. Soon more folks were retiring than were entering the workforce, and soon far more money was coming out in the form of checks than was going in the form of taxes. How was the difference made up? By borrowing. Fast forward 30 years to the LBJ presidency. LBJ had been a young congressman when FDR was in the White House, and the young congressman greatly admired the old president. When LBJ entered the White House, how he got there is another story, he set out to emulate FDR. He ran as the candidate of peace, just like FDR did, but soon engaged us in a war, since he believed that all presidents whom historians consider to be great fought wars. And he wanted to solidify that Democratic base which FDR had started and which was beginning to crumble. So he persuaded Congress to amend the Social Security law so as to give away more federal dollars, this time by providing health care to those on Social Security, called Medicare, and providing health care for the poor, called Medicaid. But Congress, even though it was controlled by the Democrats, would not give him the promises of all the cash he wanted. So a compromise was needed. This was the era of the Vietnam War, and inflation was rearing its ugly head. The Congress feared that it simply could not tax folks enough or borrow enough money in order to pay for a war and two new huge welfare programs. So Congress, in utter defiance of the Constitution, ordered the states to pay for half of Medicaid's bill. Fast forward 40 years to the present time, and we see that the federal government, in order to fight its wars and give money away to those to whom it has promised, has borrowed over $14 trillion. But the states can't borrow money for their bills. The feds won't let them. The feds thought that they could just borrow all the money they wanted and it would never catch up with them. Now we are faced with a federal government that can't pay back the money it borrowed, that can't pay the interest on the money it borrowed, that can't even run the day-to-day government without borrowing more money. And we are faced with states that can't even pay their own bills, much less the ones that the feds have forced upon them. That's why Speaker John Boehner has called this a moral issue. That's why Secretary of Defense Robert Gates has said that more threatening to our national security than terrorism is the national debt. That's why courageous senators like Mike Lee of Utah and Rand Paul of Kentucky, and courageous members of Congress like Ron Paul of Texas and Connie Mack of Florida, and courageous governors like Butch Otter of Idaho and Scott Walker of Wisconsin and Chris Christie of New Jersey have said no to more borrowing, no to more spending, no to spending what we don't have, and even no to the FDR-LBJ welfare state. This is the most serious, non-violent crisis that the government has ever faced. If it does business as usual, it will bankrupt you. If our Tea Party friends in Congress simply say no, it will hurt, but we will be saved. Tomorrow on Freedom Watch, my colleague Glenn Beck and my congressman, Scott Garrett. From New York, defending freedom every night of the week, even when it does hurt. So long, America.